I'm Charlie Sykes. Get ready for your weekly blitz of political news. Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning and welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, after heir apparent Kevin McCarthy abruptly dropped out, a full court press by Republicans to convince Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan to run for House Speaker. Governor Scott Walker appoints appeals court Judge Rebecca Bradley to the state's Supreme Court. The Packers beat the 49ers to go 4-0. UW-Madison lifts its cap on out-of-state students, the ones who pay more tuition. Mayor Tom Barrett wants the federal government to help the city fight its explosion of violent crime. Republican legislators unveiled their plan to replace the Government Accountability Board. Governor Walker wants to borrow more money for state roads. Democrats get ready for their first debate this coming Tuesday. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos endorses Marco Rubio for president. But we start with another big shakeup in the local media. The Gannett newspaper chain, the company that publishes USA Today, will buy the parent company of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, accelerating a trend toward newspaper consolidations. The move comes just 6 months after the Journal-Sentinel was spun off into a separate standalone newspaper company headquartered here. All of the broadcast entities, radio and TV stations like this one, that used to be part of Journal Communications, are now part of Scripps Media. The sale reportedly came as a shock to many newsroom employees who've endured rounds of layoffs and buyouts as revenues have shrunk. And it also means that for the first time, the newspaper's corporate headquarters won't be here in Milwaukee. Joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, former State Representative Michelle Litchens, defense attorney Dan Adams, and the managing editor at Wisconsin.com, Colin Roth. You're a newspaper guy. Your reaction? The Journal-Sentinel, once one of the most entrenched local metropolitan newspapers, now part of a chain.
I'm really not that surprised. I'm a little bit upset because I should have bought that stock when it was $5 a share, and I really considered it. I'm a print guy. I still subscribe to the Journal. I go back to the days, the Journal-Sentinel. I wonder now if there would be a satellite for the other two papers that the company owns in Wisconsin. I suspect that their stories would be smaller, more condensed. There'd be more national news, and it'll focus more on the internet as a revenue-generating source.
Well, if anybody can figure out how to do that, but I mean, this is a long saga, and newspapers obviously have had significant economic challenges. But for the Journal-Sentinel to be part of Gannett, I guess as an old print guy, it comes as kind of a shock. What changes should we look for?
First of all, I'm just so sad this is happening because we are not going to have as much local news. We're going to have one reporter in the state of Wisconsin covering all of our sports teams. We're going to have one person in the state covering everything in Madison. So we're just not going to get as many viewpoints. And I think that's kind of sad because, as you were mentioning, we are going to get more national news. It's going to look like many of the newspapers across the country, and it's not going to be specific to Milwaukee anymore.
I guess I'm not that sad about it because, I mean, I used to work at the old Journal, and I actually have some of the old newspapers around the house, and it is amazing how much thicker they are, how many more stories, how much more intensive the local coverage was. There was a time when you had something like 8 staffers up in an Ozaukee County bureau, 15 staffers out in Waukesha County. Those bureaus are gone, and the amount of local coverage, I mean, this has been a long drip for a long time here.
Well, and what you mentioned about those bureaus, that's where a lot of their readership is. That's where a lot of people want their coverage of, and the fact that they abandoned some of that coverage, I think, is a detriment to what happened. But some of this is just, frankly, economics. The print industry has kind of been in the toilet. 6 months ago, we were having the same conversation.
Well, I agree with Michelle. This is sad. I mean, essentially, it's going to become one police blotter of one-time local stories surrounding a USA Today version. It's really bad because in a democracy, you need that investigative deep dive into big issues, and I think it's winding down.
I do think that this also reflects the fact that the media is far more diverse. That at one time, if you wanted news, it was the newspaper, and it came out once a day. In case you haven't noticed, that's kind of changed. Other technologies have come up. There are other voices. And I do think that obviously you have many of these changes that have affected all newspapers across the country. But there were these specific decisions, I think, made by the Journal-Sentinel that I've talked about extensively on the show, that rather than try to serve a lot of the audience, including conservatives, I think in fact what they did was to continue to act as if they didn't need to adjust their coverage. And I also think that the obsession with getting prizes, as prestigious as it might be, I think unfortunately came at the expense of local news coverage. I mean, isn't that why people subscribe to newspapers? Because they want news about their local community?
And right now, if I want to get some local news outside of what we do at the Community Journal, and I go on the internet a lot as well, read black newspapers around the country, I still go to the Journal Citadel. There's still more information, local news there, than you'll get on any TV channel. There is lengthier, the TV spot is 15 seconds or whatever. I'm not sure they're going to abandon that. I think these people are smart enough to know that if the paper is to survive, even under new ownership, they have to focus on appeasing an audience, and that audience is suburban and city.
I think they made a decision some time ago not, in fact, to do that, not to cover these communities. I mean, there was a time when they recognized in Waukesha, Ozaukee County, that's where the readers were going, that's where the money was going. They expanded. The philosophy was, and this is what made the Milwaukee Journal such a great newspaper for many, many years, was we cover this local community like nobody else. Instead, I think you have a lot of the best and brightest reporters who are shifted off into quasi-opinion pieces like PolitiFact or investigative pieces, that might have won awards but were not necessarily read, and again came at the expense of the coverage of the the nitty-gritty. So what is your glass half full and what is your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, my glass is half full because 5 plaintiffs in a discrimination lawsuit against the city of Racine won their case and each received $15,000. My glass is half empty because their attorneys received $1.2 billion. What's wrong with that picture?
That's why people hate lawyers. Michelle Litchens.
My glass is half full because the Assembly introduced a thorough and well-thought-out bill to replace the failed GAB this week. It is half empty because the Journal-Sentinel will have their John Doe blinders on and they will never report a need for GAB reform.
Dan Adams.
My glass is half full because with proposed changes to Wisconsin's civil service law would better define just cause for disciplining bad employees and eliminated antiquated seniority rights. My glass is half empty because the law being pushed goes too far in changing how state employees are hired, replacing fair and objective civil service tests with subjective hiring procedures that will invite cronyism and political patronage.
Colin Roth.
My glass is half full because Governor Walker's appointment of Rebecca Bradley to the state Supreme Court is a great move. It's half empty because this race next year will focus far more on Walker's appointment than judicial philosophy or rule of law.
Well, my glass is half full because his colleagues obviously respect Paul Ryan enough to try to draft him to run for Speaker of the House of Representatives. It's half empty because Ryan clearly and quite sincerely does not want the job. Coming up on Sunday Insight, it's the big question on Capitol Hill. Will Congressman Paul Ryan change his mind and have a go at Speaker of the House? Will he or won't he? Paul Ryan really doesn't want to be Speaker of the House of Representatives, really. He has a young family at home. He likes his current job as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. But last week, Ryan found himself at the center of a huge effort to draft him for the job as the only one who could unite the fractious caucus. After repeatedly saying absolutely, positively no, Ryan told colleagues that he would think it over the weekend. So, Colin Roth, what do you think he will do? What do you think he should do?
Well, it was quite significant. He went from no to no comment.
Right.
And that was the big development last week. But I really don't think he should, because I think this is a bit of a fool's bargain in the sense that he really doesn't want the job. Right. And in some ways, he's being set up to fail. I think it's a really tough job right now. But the most difficult thing is he's being asked by so many people and being said he's the only one who can unite that caucus. I'm just not sure it's the right thing for him.
Okay, what do you think, Michelle? You know him pretty well.
Yeah, I don't think he should do it. Yeah. Paul Ryan is a policy wonk.
Right.
He's not a political guy.
Right.
The job of a speaker is to be very political. It's to go out there and raise a lot of money, so it's an enormous amount of travel. You have to bring consensus from the far right and the left in your own caucus to get them to support things. You have to work with Democrats to get things done. I don't think that's what Paul Ryan's about. I think it would destroy him as a person.
I think that's exactly what Paul Ryan is about. The fact that he has won the respect of everybody in his caucus. I do think that he can, in fact, unite the caucus. The other thing that the Speaker can do, but they haven't done it more recently, is he has to communicate. He has to be somebody who can present these ideas to the public. He has to be able to talk. And Paul Ryan has an extraordinarily unique package of skills. I think he has the policy. I think he has the politics. He has the communications ability. And there come to these moments that, no, this was not what he planned. But there is, as National Review magazine said, there's this call of duty. And I think that unless he can come up with a plan B, the pressure is going to be overwhelming on him. What do you think?
And I don't see why being a policy wonk is necessarily a bad thing. Why don't we maybe elect somebody for an important role who's an adult who will actually go to the table and actually work on governing and not just issue press releases and stomp their feet. I mean, there's enough of those people in the GOP caucus where I think it's time for everybody to step back and elect the adult, and I think Paul
How
Ryan's
many times, though, have we been sitting here and realized that the number one local political story is also the number one national political story? Once again, Wisconsin politicians are ground zero of American politics.
Well, you know, on the positive side, you know, being the speaker would be a step closer if he has aspirations to run for president in 4 years. Although it could be disastrous.
A lot of people think that's political suicide.
Yeah, I think the one key to his decision making has nothing to do with politics per se. It has to do with his family. I think he has his young family. He's kind of like Tom Barrett. Tom Barrett left Congress to be here with his family. If you're speaker, you're going to be in Washington.
Tom Barrett left Congress to run for governor.
Well,
you know, so
he told us
can we do the revisionism there? We got to correct that. Well, I do, and that is a sincerely held belief. Anyone who knows Paul Ryan knows how serious that is. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who serve their country who have to leave their families for a while, have to make sacrifices. And I think that right now there's real anxiety that a lot of the Republican gains are really at risk. You have a Republican presidential campaign that's turning into a clown car, with guys like Donald Trump. You have the dysfunction in the House of Representatives. And if he is convinced that if he does not step forward, that all of those gains might be lost, then what is the point of staying in House Ways and Means? If you're not going to be chairman of House Ways and Means if the Republicans lose their majority, you're not going to get anything passed if you don't win the White House. So I think that's going to be a very, very powerful message.
He will take the job.
No. I actually said on my radio show that if you'd asked me on Thursday, I would have said there's a 90 to 10 chance that he will not, because he has been so adamant. He takes about 60 seconds to issue a statement. No, I'm not interested. So, but within 24 hours, the fact that he was not closing the door was a surprise and indicates how bad the situation is, how fractious that caucus is, and how much pressure there is on him to be the guy, the man of the moment. So you may not want to hear it, but we will tell you anyway. Let's hand out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you're first.
Mine's Rupert Murdoch, who said last week that presidential candidate Ben Carson is blacker than Barack Obama. My advice is to shut up, because it's obvious you didn't use your wealth to buy intelligence.
Michelle Litchens.
Congressman Paul Ryan, do not give in to the pressure and do not run for speaker. No one can bridge the extremes in Congress, but only you can fix our nation's budget problems.
Dan Adams.
My advice is to state Republicans, stop trying to stick our grandkids with your transportation spending. You can say no to the road builders lobby, really. Increasing borrowing to pay for highway projects instead of finding stable funding sources is not fiscally conservative.
Yeah, our Democrat on the panel. Colin Roth.
Similar to Michelle, my advice for Paul Ryan, do what you think is right and do what you want to do. It's an important position, but the fate of the Republic will not be determined by who is Speaker of the House.
Well, to the new owners of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, it might be a good idea to start covering local news again and stop alienating huge numbers of potential readers who might be conservatives. Still ahead on Sunday Insights, Milwaukee is called the worst city in the country for African Americans. Why it earned such a terrible title and what needs to change. Worst in the country. A new list of the worst cities for African Americans ranks Milwaukee, Waukesha, West Dallas as at the top of the list. The website 24/7 Wall Street ranked communities on the economic, employment, and educational gaps between blacks and whites. It noted that white area households here had median incomes of $61,675, while black households had a median income of just $25,646. The report said that was one of the nation's largest income disparities. What do you make of this, Dan Adams, or is this old news?
I think this is a constant story. We hear this story maybe once a year. Another study comes out and points to what we who live in the city kind of already know, that there is this great disparity. 50 years ago, Pat Moynihan released the Moynihan Report, where he described the tangle of pathologies that were affecting the black community in the 1960s. You have poverty and lack of employment opportunity, educational outcome discrepancies, and 50 years ago, he saw that, and it's getting worse and worse.
Okay,
and we
but
are
why
ground
Milwaukee?
centric.
Because those things exist all over the country. What is this dynamic in Milwaukee? And I feel that you and I, Michael, have talked about this, for 20 years now.
Yeah. Sadly, it's been 20 years.
Right.
You know, another study came out 10 years ago, and it said that Milwaukee was the worst city for African Americans. Charlotte was actually the best. But they detailed 7 negative social indicators, including we have the highest black male incarceration rate in the country, infant mortality, gap between white and black academic achievement. You know, Milwaukee is kind of like a melting pot because we had these migrations all the way through the 60s and 70s because we had higher welfare benefits. So we had, the last one was black folks from Mississippi who came here, immediately got on welfare, etc. But the real reason why it's this bad is because we lack leadership. We have nobody really focusing on this. I've been talking about this for at least 10 years. Last study, we've been talking about it for 20. Nobody has done anything.
Well, I was struck by that as well. This study comes out, and the reaction of the local community leadership is what, Colin Roth, is nothing. Did I miss something? Zero, zilch, nada.
Absolutely nothing. And you think about the priorities of the leadership in this community. You see a streetcar, you see an arena, which is a boon for the kind of the region, but maybe not necessarily for people in poverty. And then you see some of the leadership rally around things like blocking school choice in charter schools. You see things like the only economic opportunity involves raising the minimum wage. Frankly, the people who are putting out ideas were 2 Republican legislators this year from the suburbs who came up with an opportunity plan.
How come they never seem to talk about all of the leadership of Milwaukee are Democrats, right? They have a Democrat congresswoman, Democrat mayor, Democrat county executive. What are they doing out there to help the black community in Milwaukee? They're doing nothing. And you've got Tom Barrett, who's out there trying to take care of his white constituents with his trolley. And I believe he cares about the city of Milwaukee, but he really should say, you know what? We don't have the money for this. We're going to reinvest in police and economic development in the city to help out our black community.
You know, because there is a point. We are seeing this extraordinary explosion of development in downtown Milwaukee, and it's a wonderful thing. There's no question about it. Northwestern Mutual Life. But we are kind of a tale of 2 cities in terms of the city. You have downtown, which is growing and flourishing, and then you have the neighborhoods, and they just appear to have fallen into this sort of political, social, economic black hole.
Yeah, and then we've also seen a lot of regentrification in the last decade or so. Now you have the Brewers Hill. Those houses were like $10,000 and now like $200,000. So white folks from the suburbs are trying to get back into the city. But Michelle is right. There is no leadership. It's not a priority on anybody's list. And I mean, if you look at corporate America in Milwaukee, there are 5 black people who are on 20 boards. You know, there's no way for them to get in. One of the worst things in the world is we have a governor who has appointed more black people to policy-making positions than the mayor or the county exec. Now, what does that say?
Well, we're talking about leadership in the abstract. What we need to have leadership on is our schools and kids that are going from kindergarten to 3rd grade. Because we know if at 3rd grade you don't know how to read, you're on the track to prison.
Yeah. What is it you don't get this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt, you're first.
Well, I don't get how the mayor of Racine settles an obvious discrimination case for $1.2 million and can then form his parched lips to call the lawsuit a nuisance. Maybe he's right. Racism is a nuisance, and costly, too.
Michelle Litchens.
Charlie, I don't get why Mayor Barrett asked the federal government for help with Milwaukee's increased homicide rate when he's unwilling to take money from his trolley to spend more on police officers and crime prevention programs.
Dan Adams.
Well, I don't get why Hillary Clinton stabbed President Obama in the back by blasting the president's TPP trade deal, reducing tariffs on U.S. exports and creating strict guidelines for environmental and labor standards used to be a good Clintonian policy.
Colin Roth.
Well, what I don't get is how the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails is considered so partisan when it is the FBI who's conducting the investigation.
Well, new polls show that Hillary Clinton's ratings among men are nearly as low as, and nearly as bad as Donald Trump's ratings among women. So what I don't get is why would either party even think of nominating either one of them? Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. But first, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you're first.
My winner, those who are attending the 20th anniversary of the Million Man March. I attended the first one, and it was a life-altering experience. Hope those attending today or yesterday recapture the magic. My losers, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and of course black folks living here. The report we just discussed should be shocking, but it isn't, because those with the power to change it don't care.
Michelle Litchens.
My winner is Kevin McCarthy for stepping aside in the race for Speaker. Until everyone in Congress can play well together in the sandbox, they don't deserve a new Speaker. My loser is the UW-Eau Claire and other schools who decided this year to make their homecoming court gender neutral. This is crazy. Humans are not unisex. Stop the madness before we end up like the Greeks and the Romans.
Dan Adams.
My winners are bureaucrats at UW-Milwaukee. Non-instructional UWM employees earning more than $80,000 a year have averaged almost 10% annual salary increases since 2011. This has contributed to a $38 million structural deficit for that institution. My losers are UWM students. As these bureaucrats suck up more money, teaching positions are being squeezed. You know, those professors in the classrooms. It's time for UWM to get focused on its mission, teaching young people.
Colin Roth.
My winners this week are legislative Republicans for rolling out a pretty good reform package for the Government Accountability Board. This agency has failed and lost trust. Reform is urgent. My loser is Kevin McCarthy. He did the right thing by bowing out of the race for Speaker, but it was his to lose, and he managed to blow it with his comments on the Benghazi committee.
Well, my winner, Paul Ryan, you know that he's emerged as the essential man of the conservative movement when he gets so much pressure to take a job that he really doesn't want. My loser, the state government's Government Accountability Board, inept, incompetent, arrogant, secretive, partisan, and thoroughly discredited, now on the fast track to the ashcan of history. Good riddance. Thanks for joining us for my radio show Monday morning on News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.